The Columbia University School of Medicine's annual fundraising gala was the event of the season in New York's upper echelon medical community. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow across the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, where white-jacketed waitstaff navigated between clusters of Manhattan's elite. Among them, 24-year-old Sophie Miller balanced a tray of champagne flutes with the practiced precision of someone who had worked service jobs since high school. "Remember, Sophie," hissed Vivian, the catering manager, straightening Sophie's black bow tie for the third time that evening. "These people donate millions to the medical school. Don't spill anything. Don't speak unless spoken to, and for heaven's sake, try not to knock over any priceless artifacts." Sophie nodded, fighting the urge to roll her eyes. After 2 years of working these events to supplement her graduate student stipend in Columbia's English literature program, she knew the drill: stay invisible, be efficient. And most importantly, don't fraternize with the guests, especially not the young, handsome ones whose families had buildings named after them. "I'll be the soul of discretion," Sophie promised, tucking a rebellious curl of honey-brown hair behind her ear. "No one will even notice I'm here." Across the room, it was impossible not to notice Ethan Collins. At 32, he stood a head taller than most guests, his broad shoulders filling out a custom Tom Ford tuxedo with irritating perfection. The Collins family name adorned the newest wing of the university hospital, and as the heir apparent to Collins Health Systems, a network of private hospitals spanning the East Coast, Ethan was the crown prince of this medical kingdom. "Dr. Collins, have you met my daughter? She's top of her class in neurosurgery," a silver-haired man said, practically shoving a young woman in Ethan's direction. "Dr. Williams, lovely to see you again." Ethan shook the man's hand firmly before turning to the daughter with a practiced smile. "And you must be Alexis. I've heard impressive things about your research on traumatic brain injuries." Alexis Williams blushed prettily, angling her body toward him. "I'd love to discuss my findings with you sometime, perhaps over dinner." It was the third dinner invitation Ethan had received in the past hour. He maintained his smile while scanning the room for an escape route. His mother had insisted he attend tonight's gala as the family representative, but after 4 years as Chief Strategy Officer for Collins Health, these events had become predictable exercises in endurance. "I'm afraid my schedule is quite packed with the new pediatric center opening," he demurred smoothly, "but I'd be happy to have my assistant connect you with our research department." Disappointment flickered across Alexis's face before she recovered her professional composure. "Of course, that would be wonderful." As the conversation turned to hospital politics, Ethan caught sight of his best friend and college roommate, Dr. James Chen, by the bar. James, now the youngest head of cardiology at Columbia Presbyterian, gave him a subtle nod that communicated a lifetime of friendship. "Need an extraction?" Ethan excused himself with practiced charm and made his way through the crowd, accepting congratulations on the new pediatric center and deflecting questions about his perpetual bachelor status with good-natured evasion. "You look like you could use this," James said, handing him a tumbler of whiskey when he finally reached the bar. "Is it that obvious?" Ethan loosened his bow tie slightly. "Only to someone who's known you since you threw up in our shared dorm bathroom after finals." James grinned. 20 minutes in, and you've already got that trapped animal look in your eyes." These events are all the same," Ethan murmured, taking a grateful sip of the amber liquid. "Half the attendees want funding, and the other half want to marry off their daughters to the Collins fortune." James snorted. "Poor little rich boy. Such terrible problems to have." "Shut up," Ethan said without heat. "How's Sophia?" "My wife is wonderful, thank you for asking. She's at home with Emma. 7-month-olds aren't great at black tie events." James's expression softened at the mention of his daughter. "You should come over for dinner next week. And no, before you ask, we're not setting you up with anyone. Sophia has finally accepted that you're a lost cause. Much appreciated." Ethan raised his glass in mock salute. to being a lost cause. You know, most guys would love to be in your position. Brilliant medical pedigree, obscene wealth, and apparently, though I've never seen the appeal myself, women find you somewhat attractive. Somewhat. Ethan arched an eyebrow. Don't push it, Collins. My point is, you could have anyone in this room, yet here you are, hiding at the bar with your married friend. Ethan's gaze traveled across the sea of elegant gowns and tuxedos. That's the problem. Everyone in this room wants something from me. My family's money, my company's influence, my grandfather's legacy. Nobody sees just me. James studied him for a moment. Maybe you're looking in all the wrong rooms. Before Ethan could respond, a commotion erupted near the center of the ballroom. A waitress had collided with Dr. Margaret Winters, the formidable dean of Columbia Medical School. Champagne dripped from the dean's designer gown, while the waitress, a petite woman with curly hair escaping from its pins, frantically dabbed at the spreading stain with cocktail napkins. "I am so sorry," Sophie's mortified voice carried across the suddenly hushed room. "I didn't see you turn around and, oh God, is that silk? It's silk, isn't it? I'm going to be fired. No, worse, I'm going to be blacklisted from every catering company in New York." Dean Winters stood rigid with shock and growing fury. "Young lady, do you have any idea—" "Club soda and salt," Ethan found himself saying as he approached the scene. Everyone turned to stare at him. "For the stain," he clarified. "If you treat it quickly, it won't set." Dean Winters' expression immediately softened. "Ethan, darling, how thoughtful of you to intervene. Let me help you to the ladies' room, Margaret," offered the wife of a hospital board member, shooting a disapproving glance at Sophie. As the dean was whisked away, Sophie stood frozen, still clutching soggy napkins, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Vivian materialized beside her, practically vibrating with anger. "I am so sorry for this disruption, Mr. Collins," the catering manager said. "Sophie will be leaving immediately." "That seems unnecessary," Ethan said mildly. "Accidents happen." "No, she's right." Sophie finally found her voice. "I should go. This isn't the first disaster tonight. I already mixed up the vegan and non-vegan canapes, and I'm pretty sure I served sparkling water to someone who specifically asked for still." She attempted a laugh that came out more as a strangled hiccup. "Clearly, I'm not cut out for the high-stakes world of beverage distribution." The unexpected humor caught Ethan off guard, and he found himself genuinely smiling for the first time that evening. "Sounds like a rough night." "You have no idea." Sophie sighed, then seemed to remember who she was talking to. "I mean, thank you for trying to help, Mr. Collins, but I should really—" "Actually," Ethan interrupted, "I could use some assistance. Would you mind?" Before Sophie or Vivian could object, he guided her away from the scene with a light touch on her elbow. Once they were at a safe distance near a quiet alcove, Sophie exhaled dramatically. "Thank you for the rescue, but you really didn't have to do that. I was already on thin ice before dousing the dean in Dom Perignon. Consider it self-interest. You provided the most entertaining moment of an otherwise tedious evening." Sophie narrowed her eyes, studying him. "You're Ethan Collins." "Guilty. Your family name is on half the buildings around here." "A third, at most," he corrected with a self-deprecating smile. "Well, Mr. Collins—" "Ethan, please." Well, Ethan," Sophie continued, "while I appreciate the gallant intervention, I should probably go face the music with my boss." "Or," Ethan countered, "you could tell me your name and how someone who clearly doesn't belong in catering ended up serving champagne at a medical school fundraiser." Sophie hesitated, then shrugged. "Sophie Miller. And I belong in catering exactly as much as anyone else who needs to pay rent in Manhattan while pursuing an impractical graduate degree in 19th century British literature." "Ah, not a future neurosurgeon then?" "Barely a future anything, if we're being honest." She gestured to the champagne stains on her white shirt. "Especially not a future waitress after tonight." Ethan found himself charmed by her frankness. No one in his social circle ever admitted to uncertainty about their path. Everyone was always crushing it, exceeding projections, or disrupting industries. "What's so special about 19th century British literature?" he asked. Sophie's eyes lit up. "You really want to know?" "I wouldn't have asked if I didn't." "Ah, it's the last era where people wrote these incredible, sweeping novels about ordinary lives and made them seem extraordinary," she said, suddenly animated. "Before modernism fragmented everything and postmodernism turned it all into a joke. There's this belief in the significance of everyday emotional experiences." She stopped abruptly. "And now I sound like the worst kind of academic bore." "Not at all," Ethan said, surprised to find he meant it. "It's refreshing to meet someone passionate about something completely outside my world." "And what is your world exactly?" Sophie asked. "Besides having your name on buildings and saving clumsy waitresses from social execution." Ethan laughed. "Healthcare administration, strategic planning, board meetings, decidedly less romantic than your Victorian novels." "Austen was Regency, actually. Victorian came later with Dickens, the Brontes," she caught herself. "And I'm doing it again. Sorry." "Don't apologize, it's Sophie." Vivian's sharp voice cut through their conversation. "A word, please." Sophie winced. "The executioner calls." "Thanks again for the rescue attempt, Ethan. Enjoy the rest of your evening." She hurried away before he could respond, leaving him with the strange sensation that something significant had just happened. When he rejoined James at the bar, his friend was watching him with undisguised curiosity. "Care to explain what that was about?" Ethan shrugged. "Just being polite." "Uh-huh." James looked unconvinced. "In the 12 years I've known you, I've never seen you just be polite to anyone for that long, especially not at one of these functions you hate so much." "She was interesting," Ethan admitted. "Different." "Different how?" "She didn't know who I was at first, and when she figured it out, she didn't—" He struggled to articulate the quality that had caught his attention. "She didn't change." James nodded slowly. "I see. Don't read too much into it. Wouldn't dream of it." James's innocent tone belied the knowing glint in his eyes. "Though I feel compelled to point out that different and interesting are not words you typically use to describe the socially appropriate women your mother keeps introducing you to." Ethan drained his whiskey. "Drop it, James." "Consider it dropped." James raised his hands in surrender. "Now, shall we make our obligatory rounds to the major donors before escaping to grab a real drink somewhere people actually eat carbs?" As they circulated through the crowd, Ethan found himself scanning the room for a glimpse of curly hair and a stained white shirt, but Sophie was nowhere to be seen. He told himself it was just curiosity, a momentary diversion in an otherwise predictable evening, and firmly pushed the thought of her from his mind. In the service corridor behind the ballroom, Sophie was getting fired. "This is the third event where you've caused a disruption," Vivian said, checking items off on her clipboard without meeting Sophie's eyes. "We simply can't risk our relationship with these clients." "I understand," Sophie said quietly, removing her bow tie. "Your final check will be mailed to the address on file. Please return your uniform by the end of the week." As Sophie changed into her street clothes in the staff bathroom, she tried to calculate how this financial setback would affect her carefully balanced budget. The catering gigs paid significantly better than campus jobs, especially with tips. Without this income, she might need to consider deferring another semester. By the time she emerged into the chilly September night, the reality of her situation had fully sunk in. She would need to find another job immediately, update her resume, and... "Sophie?" She turned to find Ethan Collins leaning against a sleek black Audi at the curb, his bow tie undone and hanging loose around his neck. "Are you stalking me now?" she asked, too tired for proper social niceties. "Because I've had a really crappy night, and I'm not in the mood for rich guy charity." If he was offended by her tone, he didn't show it. "No stalking. I was leaving and saw you come out. Thought I'd make sure you were okay." "I got fired, so not particularly," Sophie admitted, adjusting her worn messenger bag on her shoulder. "But I'll survive. Always do." can I offer you a ride home?" Sophie laughed. "No offense, but getting into expensive cars with men I've just met isn't really my thing, no matter how many buildings their families own." Ethan smiled, and Sophie noticed for the first time how it transformed his face, softening the aristocratic angles into something more approachable. "Fair enough," he said. "Though in my defense, I was going to have my driver take you. I wouldn't be in the car." "That's slightly less creepy, but still no." She began walking toward the subway entrance at the corner. "Wait," Ethan called after her. "What if I could help you find another job?" Sophie stopped and turned back. "Why would you do that?" Ethan seemed to consider the question carefully. "Because I caused a scene that contributed to your firing. Because I have connections that could be useful. Or maybe because you're the only person who's been honest with me all night. I appreciate the offer, but I don't need charity." "Not charity, networking." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "My family foundation is hosting an event at the New York Public Library next week, a literacy fundraiser. They always need people who actually know something about literature." Sophie hesitated, then took the card. "I'll think about it." "That's all I'm asking." Ethan stepped back toward his car. "Good night, Sophie Miller. I hope our paths cross again." "Good night, Ethan Collins," she replied, tucking the card into her pocket before continuing toward the subway. As her train rumbled downtown toward her shared apartment in Washington Heights, Sophie pulled out the heavy cardstock and ran her thumb over the embossed lettering. Ethan Collins, Chief Strategy Officer, Collins Health Systems. Below his name was an email address and phone number. "Ridiculous," she muttered to herself, but she carefully placed the card in her wallet anyway. Back in his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, Ethan found himself thinking about the waitress with the quick wit and complete disinterest in his family name. It had been refreshing. He pulled out his phone and composed a quick email to his assistant. "Catherine, please contact the Collins Foundation about their upcoming literacy event at the NYPL. I'd like to recommend someone for their event staff, an English literature graduate student named Sophie Miller from Columbia, and I'll be attending the event personally. Please clear my calendar." He hesitated before hitting send, aware that his behavior was uncharacteristic. Then he thought of Sophie's unguarded enthusiasm when talking about literature, so different from the calculated conversations he usually navigated. He pressed send and went to bed, telling himself he was simply doing a good deed for someone who needed a break. Nothing more. But as he drifted off to sleep, he couldn't help wondering if he would see her again, and why that possibility made him smile into the darkness. The Collins Foundation's annual literacy gala transformed the New York Public Library into a wonderland of books and opulence. Sophie, clipboard in hand, surveyed the Rosemane reading room with a mixture of awe and anxiety. Somehow, Ethan's recommendation had landed her not just a server position, but a role as an assistant event coordinator. "Sophie, the author panel needs their introduction cards," called Catherine, Ethan's impossibly efficient assistant who'd taken Sophie under her wing. "On it!" Sophie hurried across the marble floor, nearly colliding with a waiter carrying champagne, an irony not lost on her. She hadn't seen Ethan yet, though Catherine had confirmed he would attend. Part of her hoped to avoid him entirely. The other part kept glancing toward the entrance. "You seem to have landed on your feet rather spectacularly," came a familiar voice behind her. Sophie turned to find Ethan, devastatingly handsome, in a navy suit that probably cost more than her annual rent. "Mr. Collins," she said formally, aware of watching eyes. "Thank you for the recommendation, though I suspect this position is several levels above my qualifications." "Nonsense. Catherine says you're doing brilliantly." His smile reached his eyes. "And I thought we'd established that I'm Ethan." "Well, Ethan, some of us can't afford to be on first-name basis with the boss." "Technically, I'm not your boss. The foundation is separate from—" "Sophie, the Pulitzer winner needs you," Catherine called. "Duty calls," Sophie said with an apologetic shrug. "Thanks again for the opportunity." Throughout the evening, they orbited each other like celestial bodies, exchanging glances across the room. When Sophie expertly handled a dispute between two competing authors, Ethan watched with undisguised admiration. Later, as the crowd thinned, he found her collecting abandoned programs. "I have a proposition for you," he said without preamble. Sophie raised an eyebrow. "That sounds ominous." "The Foundation needs someone with literary knowledge to help coordinate our educational programs. Catherine thinks you'd be perfect." "Catherine thinks that, does she?" "Fine, it was my idea," Ethan admitted. "But she agrees." Sophie studied him suspiciously. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you're qualified and need a job. And because—" He hesitated, then continued with uncharacteristic honesty. "I enjoy talking to you. You barely know me. I'd like to change that." He handed her another business card. "The job is real, the salary is fair, and there are no strings attached. Think about it." After he walked away, Sophie examined the card. Handwritten on the back was a personal note. "The Foundation could use someone who makes 19th century literature sound exciting. So could I." 2 weeks later, Sophie found herself with a cubicle at the Collins Foundation offices, developing reading programs for underprivileged schools. The job was perfect, intellectually stimulating, well-paid, and accommodating of her graduate studies. There was just one problem. Ethan Collins kept finding reasons to visit the Foundation floor. "He never came down here before you," whispered Zoe, her colleague. "Not once in the 3 years I've worked here." "That's ridiculous," Sophie insisted, though she'd noticed the pattern herself. Their interactions remained professional, but charged with something neither acknowledged. He'd ask her opinion on literary selections. She'd challenge his conventional choices. Their debates became legendary among the staff. One evening, working late, Sophie found Ethan in the break room, struggling with the coffee machine. "For someone who runs a healthcare empire, you're remarkably defeated by basic technology," she teased, reaching around him to press the correct sequence of buttons. "I have people for that," he said, standing close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. "Yes, and now I'm one of them, apparently." Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither moved. Then Catherine appeared in the doorway, breaking the spell. "Mr. Collins, your mother is on line 1 about the hospital board meeting." Reality crashed back. Sophie stepped away, suddenly remembering the vast differences between them. He was Ethan Collins, heir to billions, and she was a scholarship student with student loans and a cubicle. "I should get back to work," she murmured, slipping past him. But that night, as Sophie rode the subway home, her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Dinner tomorrow?" No talk of work or foundations. Just 2 people getting to know each other. Ethan. Sophie stared at her phone, heart racing. This was exactly the complication she'd been trying to avoid. Dating the boss's son was career suicide 101. Dating a billionaire when you shopped at thrift stores was emotional disaster 101. Yet her fingers typed, "I don't date people from work." His response came immediately. "Technically, I don't work at the Foundation." Loophole. Despite herself, Sophie smiled. "Fine, 1 dinner as friends." "I'll take it. 7 p.m. tomorrow, I'll send a car. I can take the subway like a normal New Yorker." "Normal New Yorkers take cars when someone offers. See you at 7. Sophie put her phone away, telling herself this wasn't a date. But as the train rattled toward her apartment, she couldn't help wondering what she would wear, and why her heart wouldn't stop racing at the thought of seeing Ethan Collins somewhere other than work. Tomorrow would just be dinner between friends. Nothing more. She almost believed it. Sophie expected Ethan to choose some impossibly exclusive restaurant where the menu had no prices. Instead, his driver delivered her to a small Italian place in the West Village with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. "This is not what I expected," she admitted, as Ethan greeted her at the door, dressed in jeans and a simple button-down. "Antonio's has the best carbonara in the city," he said with a genuine smile. "I figured you'd appreciate authenticity over pretension." The restaurant owner greeted Ethan like family, leading them to a corner table. Mr. Ethan's father brought him here since he was this high, Antonio explained, gesturing to knee height. Now he brings special friends, very special. Sophie raised an eyebrow at Ethan after Antonio left. Special friends? Don't read into it. I rarely bring anyone here, Ethan admitted. It's one of the few places where I'm just a regular customer, not a Collins. Over wine and pasta, they discovered unexpected commonalities. They both loved classic films, had the same dry sense of humor, and shared a passion for travel. Though Sophie's experiences were budget hostels, while Ethan's were luxury resorts. Wait, you've never been to Europe? Ethan asked incredulously. Some of us don't have private jets, Sophie laughed. My exotic travel consists of the New Jersey Turnpike to visit my dad. What about your mum? Sophie's smile faltered. She died when I was 12. Cancer. I'm sorry, Ethan said softly, instinctively reaching for her hand. It's okay. Dad did his best, working double shifts as a high school English teacher. That's where I got my love of literature. And your mother? She was a nurse, believed in helping people. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. Is that why you don't like me? Because you see me as some corporate healthcare villain? I don't dislike you, Sophie protested. I live in a different world, one where people worry about student loans and rent increases. Maybe our worlds aren't as different as you think, Ethan said. My grandfather was a doctor who mortgaged everything to open a small clinic. The empire came later. As the evening progressed, Sophie found herself increasingly drawn to this version of Ethan, thoughtful, unpretentious, and surprisingly vulnerable when describing the pressure of family expectations. After dinner, they walked through Washington Square Park, where street musicians played jazz under the arch. Dance with me, Ethan said impulsively, holding out his hand. Here? In public? Sophie laughed nervously. Especially here. No one's watching. Hesitantly, she stepped into his arms. They swayed to the saxophone, bodies gradually moving closer until Sophie could feel his heartbeat. When Ethan looked down at her, his expression made her breath catch. I shouldn't be doing this, she whispered. Why not? Because tomorrow I'll go back to my cubicle, and you'll go back to your penthouse, and this will have been some fantasy. Or, Ethan countered, tomorrow could be the beginning of something real. Before she could respond, his lips found hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened with unexpected intensity. Sophie's logical mind screamed caution, but her body surrendered to the moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, reality came crashing back. I should go, Sophie said, stepping back. This is moving too fast. Sophie, thank you for dinner, she said firmly, but I need to think. On the ride home, Sophie's mind raced. Dating Ethan Collins would invite scrutiny, jealousy from co-workers, and inevitable heartbreak when he realized they were fundamentally incompatible. Yet she couldn't stop thinking about his kiss, or the way he'd listened to her stories as if they were more important than all his board meetings. The next morning, the foundation office buzzed with excitement over a surprise visit from Evelyn Collins, Ethan's mother, and the formidable chairwoman of both the foundation and Collins Health. She never comes here, Zoe whispered frantically. Something big must be happening. Sophie barely had time to process this when Catherine appeared at her cubicle. Mrs. Collins would like to see you now. Heart pounding, Sophie followed Catherine to the conference room, where an elegant, silver-haired woman awaited. Evelyn Collins radiated power in her designer suit, her assessing gaze coolly evaluating Sophie. So you're the literature girl my son can't stop talking about, Evelyn said without preamble. I work on the literacy programs, yes, Sophie managed. Let's be direct, shall we? Ethan has been distracted lately. The board is concerned. I'm not sure how that involves me, Mrs. Collins. Don't you? Evelyn's smile was arctic. My son has always been focused, dedicated to our family legacy. Until recently. Sophie straightened her shoulders. With all due respect, I'm an employee doing my job. If you have concerns about my performance, your performance is exemplary, Evelyn interrupted. "Your influence on my son is what concerns me." Before Sophie could respond, the door opened and Ethan himself walked in, his expression darkening when he saw them together. "Mother, this is unexpected. Just getting to know your newest employee," Evelyn replied smoothly. The tension between mother and son was palpable. Sophie felt like a chess piece in a game she didn't understand. "Sophie, could you excuse us?" Ethan asked, his voice tight. In the hallway, Sophie overheard raised voices. Phrases like board expectations and family responsibility drifted through the door, followed by Ethan's firm, "My personal life is not up for committee approval." When Ethan found her later, his face was grim. "I'm sorry about that." "What was it really about?" Sophie asked. "Politics. The Collins Hospital Group is considering a merger that would make us the largest private healthcare provider on the East Coast. The timing is sensitive. And your mother thinks I'm a distraction." "My mother thinks everything not related to Collins' health is a distraction," Ethan said bitterly. "I've spent my entire life living up to Collins' expectations. Maybe it's time I figured out what I want." His intensity frightened Sophie. "Ethan, we had one dinner, one kiss. That's not enough to start upending your life." "Maybe it was enough to make me realize my life needs upending." He stepped closer. "Have dinner with me again tonight." "Your mother would fire me." "She can't. I'd stop her." "That's exactly the problem," Sophie exclaimed. "You have this power I'll never have. Every relationship in your life is influenced by who you are. How could anything between us ever be equal?" Ethan's phone buzzed with an incoming call. "The board," he said apologetically. "I have to take this." "Go," Sophie said softly. "That's your real world, Ethan." As he walked away, Sophie felt a hollow ache in her chest. One perfect evening had shown her a glimpse of something wonderful, and all the reasons it could never work. That evening, a package arrived at Sophie's apartment. A first edition Jane Austen with a note. "Some things transcend time and social boundaries. Give us a chance. E." Sophie traced the book's leather binding, torn between her growing feelings for Ethan and the reality of their different worlds. She didn't belong in his life of galas and board meetings, just as he would never truly understand her world of student debt and subway delays. Yet as she held his gift, Sophie couldn't help wondering, what if Austen was right, and love really could overcome all differences? 3 weeks of cautious dating followed. Quiet dinners in out-of-the-way restaurants, walks in the park, and conversations that lasted until dawn. With each meeting, the walls Sophie had built began to crumble. "You're seeing him again tonight?" her roommate Lily asked, watching Sophie try on her third outfit. "That's what, the 10th date?" "8th," Sophie corrected. "And it's not a big deal. Honey, you're dating one of New York's most eligible bachelors, the man whose family name is on hospital wings. That's the definition of a big deal." Sophie sighed. "When you put it that way, it sounds insane." "Insanely romantic," Lily countered. "Like a modern fairy tale. Fairy tales end with marriage. This will end with reality." But reality seemed increasingly distant when she was with Ethan. Despite her reservations, Sophie found herself falling for the man behind the Collins name. His unexpected kindness, his dry wit, the way his confident public persona gave way to vulnerability when they were alone. That night, after a movie at an old art house theater, they walked along the Hudson River waterfront, fingers intertwined. "I have to go to Boston tomorrow," Ethan said. "Merger negotiations." "How long will you be gone?" Sophie tried to keep her tone casual. "A week, maybe more." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Come with me." Sophie stared at him. "I can't just drop everything and fly to Boston." "Why not? The foundation would give you the time off. We could explore the city together in the evenings after my meetings." "That's not the point, Ethan. I have responsibilities. Classes, my thesis, work that doesn't revolve around your schedule." Frustration flickered across his face. "This is important to me. I want you there." "And I want to be there," Sophie said gently. "But my life can't simply bend around yours whenever you want." The old tension resurfaced, the fundamental imbalance between them. Ethan lived in a world where private jets waited at his convenience. Sophie lived by subway schedules and financial aid deadlines. "I thought we were past this," Ethan said, his voice tight. "Past what?" "The reality of our situations." Sophie pulled her hand from his. "You can decide on a whim to fly to Boston because your life allows that flexibility. Mine doesn't. I could make it work. One call and—" "That's exactly what I'm talking about," Sophie exclaimed. "One call from you changes everything. Do you have any idea what that's like for me? To know that any door in my life could suddenly open because Ethan Collins wants it to?" His expression hardened. "So my influence is fine when it gets you a job, but problematic when I want to spend time with you?" The accusation stung because it held a grain of truth. "That's not fair, isn't it? You accepted the position at the foundation, which I've worked hard at and earned on my own merit." "I never said you didn't." Ethan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "But you can't have it both ways, Sophie. You can't simultaneously resent my privilege and benefit from it." The words hung between them, ugly and true. Sophie stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "Maybe this was a mistake," she said quietly. "Maybe we've been kidding ourselves." Ethan's anger deflated, replaced by something more vulnerable. "Don't say that. We can figure this out." "Can we? Your mother already sees me as an obstacle to your real responsibilities. The board expects you to follow the Collins path, and every time we go out, I feel like an imposter in your world." "You're not in my world," Ethan said, reaching for her. "We're creating our own." But the spell was broken. Sophie shook her head, tears threatening. "I need space to think, Ethan. Go to Boston. Do what you need to do." "And us?" "I don't know." The ride back to her apartment was silent, both lost in their own thoughts. When his driver pulled up to her building, Sophie hesitated before opening the door. "I do care about you," she said softly. "That's what makes this so hard." Ethan's reply was equally quiet. "Hard doesn't mean impossible." But as Sophie climbed the 5 flights to her apartment, each step felt like a reminder of the distance between them, not just financially, but in how they navigated the world. The next morning, she threw herself into work at the foundation, ignoring the concerned glances from colleagues who had grown accustomed to Ethan's frequent visits to her desk. 3 days passed with no word from Boston. Sophie told herself it was for the best, that the space was necessary. On the 4th day, Zoe dropped a newspaper on her desk, folded to the society page. "Thought you should see this before the office gossip starts." The photo showed Ethan at a Boston charity event, smiling politely beside a stunning blonde woman identified as Dr. Alexandra Hayes, daughter of Hayes Pharmaceuticals CEO Richard Hayes. The caption noted they had attended the same prep school and had been rumored to be romantically linked in the past. "They're saying it's a power match made in heaven," Zoe said apologetically. "Hayes Pharmaceuticals would be a huge asset to the Collins merger." Sophie stared at the image, her chest tight. "Good for him," she managed. "It makes perfect sense." That evening, Sophie's phone finally displayed Ethan's name, but she let it go to voicemail. His message was brief. "It's not what it looks like. Call me." She didn't. Instead, she immersed herself in graduate work, staying late at the library to avoid both her empty apartment and the foundation office. On the rare occasions she ventured to work, she requested field assignments at schools across the city. 2 weeks after the Boston trip, Sophie was sorting through book donations at a South Bronx elementary school when a familiar voice made her freeze. "Your assistant said I might find you here." She turned to find Ethan in the doorway of the school storage room, looking uncharacteristically disheveled in wrinkled clothes. "What are you doing here?" Sophie asked, heart racing despite her resolve. "Looking for you. You've been avoiding me." "I've been busy. For 2 weeks." Ethan stepped closer. "You didn't return my calls. You've been hiding at schools across the city." "I haven't been hiding," Sophie protested. "This is my job." "And avoiding me. Is that your job too? What do you want from me, Ethan? Sophie set down the book she'd been holding. I saw the photos. You and Alexandra Hayes make perfect sense together. The merger, the connections. It's the Collins way. Ethan's expression darkened. Is that what you think of me? That I'd toss aside what we have for a business arrangement? I think you live in a world where relationships and business are often the same thing. Alex is the daughter of a family friend. We were seated together at a function I was obligated to attend. He closed the distance between them. There's nothing between us. It doesn't matter, Sophie said, stepping back. Those photos just reminded me of what I already knew. You belong in that world of galas and mergers and strategic alliances. I don't. That's not who I am. It's part of who you are, Sophie countered. And it should be. Your family has built something important, but I can't fit into that equation. You're not an equation to solve. Ethan's frustration boiled over. You're the woman I'm falling in love with. The words hung in the storage room, unexpected and transformative. Sophie stared at him, speechless. I didn't plan to say that here, Ethan continued more quietly. Surrounded by donated books in a school storage room. But it's true, Sophie. I'm falling in love with you, and it terrifies me because for the first time in my life, I can't control the outcome. Sophie felt tears threatening. Ethan, no, let me finish. I've spent my entire life following the path laid out for me, the right schools, the right position in the family business, the right connections, and I was good at it. But I was never happy. Not until I met you. He took her hands in his. You don't care about the Collins name or fortune. You challenge me, frustrate me, make me question everything I thought I knew, and I've never felt more alive. It's not that simple, Sophie whispered, though her resolve was weakening. It can be, Ethan insisted. The merger closed yesterday. I fulfilled my obligations to the board. Now I get to choose what comes next. And what is that? I don't know exactly, but I want you to be part of it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn book. I found this at a second-hand bookshop in Boston. Sophie took it, a rare early edition of Pride and Prejudice with annotations from a previous owner. Elizabeth and Darcy, Ethan said with a small smile. Different worlds, mutual prejudices, and a love that overcame both. That's fiction, Sophie protested weakly. Maybe, but I'm willing to find out if we can write our own ending. His expression grew serious. I'm not asking you to change who you are or to fit into some predefined role in my life. I'm asking for a chance, for us to figure this out together. Sophie looked down at the book in her hands, then back at the man before her, not Ethan Collins, heir to billions, but simply Ethan, the man who remembered her favorite author and sought her out in a school storage room to tell her he was falling in love. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I, he confessed. But I'm more afraid of losing you. Sophie took a deep breath. The Collins family dinner is this weekend. Ethan looked confused by the apparent non sequitur. Yes? If we're really doing this, really trying, then I should meet your family, properly, as whatever we are. Hope bloomed in Ethan's eyes. We're a work in progress, he said, pulling her into his arms. And yes, I want you there. Fair warning, though. My mother is formidable. Until I've faced down Dean Winters with champagne dripping from her silk gown, Sophie said with a tentative smile. I think I can handle your mother. Don't be so sure, Ethan laughed, pressing his forehead to hers. But I'll be right beside you. As his lips found hers, Sophie allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, their different worlds could merge into something new and unexpected, something that defied categorization and expectation, just like their relationship. But as she melted into his embrace, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning. The Collins family dinner would be more than a meal. It would be a test, one that could either solidify their fragile new beginning or shatter it completely. Sophie had faced dissertation committees with less anxiety than she felt standing before the imposing limestone mansion on the Upper East Side. The Collins family home, a five-story townhouse that occupied half a city block, loomed over her like a physical manifestation of all her insecurities. "You look beautiful," Ethan murmured, squeezing her hand as they approached the front steps. "They'll love you." "You're a terrible liar," Sophie replied, smoothing the simple black dress she'd splurged on for the occasion. "But I appreciate the effort." The door opened before they could ring, revealing a uniformed housekeeper who greeted Ethan with warm familiarity. "Mr. Ethan, everyone is gathered in the drawing room." Ethan kept his hand firmly on the small of Sophie's back as they moved through the entrance hall, a space larger than her entire apartment, adorned with museum-quality artwork and furniture that had probably witnessed centuries of history. "Just breathe," he whispered. "Remember, they're just people. Extraordinarily wealthy, powerful people who think I'm corrupting their air," Sophie muttered under her breath. Before Ethan could respond, they reached the drawing room doorway. Inside, four people turned to regard them with varying expressions of curiosity and assessment. "Ethan, darling, you're late." Evelyn Collins rose from her seat with practiced grace, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly when her gaze landed on Sophie. "Traffic," Ethan replied, stepping forward to kiss his mother's cheek. "Mother, you remember Sophie Miller?" "Of course. Our literature specialist." Evelyn's tone was pleasant but cool. "How unexpected to see you here." Sophie extended her hand with more confidence than she felt. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Collins. Your home is beautiful." Before Evelyn could respond, a tall, distinguished man with Ethan's jawline and salt-and-pepper hair approached. "So this is the young lady we've been hearing about." William Collins, Ethan's father, had the same commanding presence as his son, but with an added warmth in his eyes. "Welcome to our home, Sophie." "The infamous Sophie Miller," drawled a young woman who could only be Ethan's sister, her resemblance to Evelyn striking despite her more modern styling. "I was beginning to think you were a figment of my brother's imagination." "Audrey," Ethan warned, but Sophie could see the affection between the siblings. "What? You've been mysteriously unavailable for weeks, cancelling family obligations for the first time in your perfect eldest son history," Audrey said with a mischievous smile. "We were all dying to meet the woman responsible for such unprecedented behavior." The final occupant of the room, an elderly gentleman seated in a leather wingback chair, observed the exchange with shrewd eyes. "Bring her here, Ethan," he said, his voice surprisingly strong despite his advanced age. "Let me see this girl properly." Ethan guided Sophie toward his grandfather, Dr. Harold Collins, the patriarch who had transformed a single clinic into the Collins health empire. At 93, he retained the penetrating gaze of a physician who had spent decades diagnosing patients at a glance. "So," he said without preamble, "you're the English literature scholar." "Graduate student," Sophie corrected gently. "I haven't earned the title of scholar yet." The old man's lips twitched. "Honest. That's refreshing in this house." He gestured to the chair beside him. "Sit. Tell me why 19th century novels matter in a world of smartphones and 10-second attention spans." Sophie glanced at Ethan, who nodded encouragingly before taking the offered seat. "Because they remind us that human emotions and struggles haven't changed, even if our technology has," she replied. "Love, ambition, social constraints, moral choices, Austen and Dickens and the Brontes were writing about the same things we still grapple with today." Dr. Collins studied her for a moment before a genuine smile transformed his austere features. "Well said." He turned to Ethan. "This one has substance, unlike that Hayes girl your mother keeps pushing on you." "Father, please," Evelyn interjected smoothly. "Let's not discuss business matters tonight." She gestured toward the dining room. "Dinner is served." The Collins dining room featured a table that could comfortably seat 20, though tonight only 6 places were set at one end. Sophie noted with trepidation that she'd been placed directly across from Evelyn, with Ethan at her right. As the first course was served by silent, efficient staff, William Collins engaged Sophie in surprisingly genuine conversation about her studies and the Foundation's literacy programs. Ethan watched with evident relief as his father showed genuine interest in Sophie's work. "The Foundation was originally my mother's project," William explained. "She believed education was the great equalizer. And now Sophie is revolutionizing our approach," Ethan added proudly. "The pilot program she developed for underserved schools has shown remarkable results in just a few months." Sophie felt herself blushing under the praise. "Hardly revolutionary. I just suggested we focus on connecting students with stories that reflect their own experiences before introducing classics. An approach that increased participation by 63%. Ethan pointed out. "Impressive," William acknowledged. "Though I understand you're focusing on literature rather than practical skills development. Is there data supporting the impact on testing outcomes?" The question revealed the businessman beneath William's genial exterior. Before Sophie could respond, Evelyn interjected. "I'm more curious about Miss Miller's background," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "You mentioned your father is a teacher." "Yes, high school English in New Jersey," Sophie replied. "He's dedicated his life to public education." "How admirable," Evelyn said. "And your mother?" Sophie felt Ethan tense beside her. "My mother was a nurse. She passed away when I was 12. "I'm sorry to hear that," Evelyn said, with what appeared to be genuine sympathy. "Healthcare has always been the Collins family mission. My husband's grandfather started with a single neighborhood clinic during the Depression. And now you have hospitals named after you," Sophie observed. "We provide over $700 million in charitable care annually," Evelyn countered. "The Collins name opens doors, yes, but it also carries tremendous responsibility." The implication was clear. The Collins legacy was sacred, and outsiders who might threaten it were not welcome. "Sophie understands responsibility," Ethan said, his voice tight. "She worked 3 jobs to put herself through undergrad while caring for her father after his heart attack." Sophie shot him a look. She hadn't shared that particular detail with the intention of having it used as ammunition in family dinner conversation. "Your father had heart problems?" Dr. Collins asked, suddenly alert. "What was the diagnosis?" "Atrial fibrillation," Sophie replied. "He's stable now with medication." The old doctor nodded. "The Collins Cardiac Center pioneered a minimally invasive procedure for persistent AFib cases. If he ever needs additional treatment, I'd be happy to make a referral." Sophie was taken aback by the unexpected offer. "That's very kind, thank you." "It's not kindness," Dr. Collins dismissed gruffly. "It's medicine. Politics and business have complicated healthcare, but at its core, it's still about helping people." "That's what my mother believed," Sophie said softly. Something shifted in the old man's expression. "What hospital did she work at?" "St. Luke's in Newark." Dr. Collins nodded slowly. "Good facility. Under-resourced, but good people." The conversation drifted to safer topics through the remainder of dinner, though Sophie remained acutely aware of Evelyn's evaluating gaze. After dessert, Audrey suggested showing Sophie the family photos in the library, an offer that seemed innocuous until they were alone among the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. "So," Audrey said, dropping her society smile, "you and my brother." Sophie braced herself. "Yes? I've never seen him like this." Audrey studied her curiously, defying mother, skipping board meetings, actually smiling at family events. "It's unsettling." "I'm not trying to change him," Sophie said defensively. "Aren't you?" Audrey raised an eyebrow. "Because from where I'm standing, that's exactly what's happening. And it might be the best thing that's ever happened to him." Sophie blinked in surprise. "I thought you'd be against this." "Against my workaholic brother finding someone who makes him happy? God, no." Audrey laughed. "I've spent years watching Ethan sacrifice everything for the Collins name. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to have a perfect older brother?" He's hardly perfect," Sophie said with a small smile. "Exactly," Audrey exclaimed. And you see that. You see him, not the Collins heir, not the future CEO, just Ethan. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. Plus, the look on Mother's face when you walked in with him was priceless. She's been pushing the Hayes merger match for years. Your mother doesn't approve of me. Sophie stated the obvious. Mother doesn't approve of anything that threatens her vision of the Collins legacy. Audrey corrected. But grandfather likes you, and that counts for a lot. He's still the ultimate authority in this family. Before Sophie could respond, they were interrupted by Ethan's arrival. Should I be worried about what you two are discussing? He asked warily. Just girl talk, Audrey said innocently. I was about to show Sophie your awkward teenage photos. That's my cue to rescue you, Ethan told Sophie, offering his hand. Grandfather has asked to speak with us in his study. As they climbed the grand staircase to the 3rd floor, Sophie whispered, Your sister is surprisingly on our side. Audrey has always encouraged anything that disrupts Mother's plans, Ethan replied with a fond smile. But don't underestimate her. She's as strategic as any Collins. Dr. Harold Collins' study was a testament to a life spanning medicine, business, and scholarship. Medical texts shared shelves with business journals and literary classics. The old man himself sat behind an antique desk, examining them thoughtfully as they entered. Sit, he commanded, gesturing to the chairs opposite him. When they were settled, he addressed Ethan directly. Your mother thinks this relationship is a distraction from your responsibilities. Ethan stiffened. My personal life is not a board matter. Everything is a board matter when you're a Collins, his grandfather countered. Your great-grandfather built this family's legacy from nothing. Your grandfather expanded it. Your father stabilized it. And you're meant to transform it for the next generation. Sophie felt her heart sinking. Despite the momentary connection at dinner, it seemed the patriarch was aligned with Evelyn after all. I understand my responsibilities, Ethan said tightly. Do you? Dr. Collins asked sharply. Because I'm not certain you do. The old man turned his penetrating gaze to Sophie. Young lady, what do you know about the current state of healthcare in this country? Startled by the abrupt change in focus, Sophie gathered her thoughts. I know it's broken, costs are prohibitive, access is unequal, and patients are treated as profit centers rather than people. Precisely. Dr. Collins nodded approvingly. The system has lost its way, medicine has become business, and business has forgotten its purpose. He turned back to Ethan. That's your responsibility, not just maintaining what we've built, but remembering why we built it. Confusion crossed Ethan's face. I don't understand. Your mother believes this young woman is a distraction from your duty to Collins' health, the old doctor explained. I believe she might be the reminder you need of what that duty actually entails. Sir? Sophie ventured hesitantly. My wife, Ethan's grandmother, was a literature professor, Dr. Collins revealed with unexpected softness. She used to say that medicine heals the body, but stories heal the soul. She kept me human when the business of healthcare threatened to make me forget why I became a doctor in the first place. He leaned forward, suddenly looking every one of his 93 years. The Collins legacy isn't about buildings with our name on them. It's about caring for people when they're most vulnerable. It's about seeing them as human beings, not numbers on a spreadsheet. He fixed Ethan with an intense stare. Your mother wants you to marry strategically to strengthen the business. I want you to find someone who will strengthen your humanity, because that's what this family's work has always been about. Ethan looked stunned. You're saying you approve of my relationship with Sophie. I'm saying I've watched you become increasingly consumed by spreadsheets and boardrooms, his grandfather replied. And tonight is the first time in years I've seen you passionate about something that actually matters. The old man's gaze shifted to Sophie. You remind me of my Elizabeth, principled, unimpressed by wealth, devoted to stories that illuminate the human condition. Sophie felt tears threatening. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep challenging him, Dr. Collins said simply. Keep reminding him that the patients in our hospitals are people with stories, not profit centers. He pulled open a desk drawer and removed a small velvet box. This was Elizabeth's, he said, sliding it toward Ethan. When the time is right, and only then, she would have wanted you to have it. Ethan stared at the box without touching it. Grandfather, we're not... I'm 93, boy. I don't have time for your timelines. The old doctor closed the drawer with finality. Keep it. The decision of when or if to use it is yours. The implication hung in the air, making Sophie's cheeks burn. Dr. Collins chuckled at their discomfort. Now go. Your mother is undoubtedly planning her counter-offensive as we speak. As they descended the stairs in stunned silence, Ethan finally spoke. I'm sorry about that. He's always been direct. He's remarkable, Sophie said honestly. He likes you, Ethan said with wonder. The great Harold Collins, who terrifies hospital administrators and has made board members cry, likes you. Apparently I remind him of his wife, Sophie said, still processing the encounter. Ethan stopped on the landing, turning to face her. I didn't know about my grandmother being a literature professor. He never talks about her. Maybe he needed someone who would understand, Sophie suggested. They rejoined the family in the drawing room, where Evelyn's sharp eyes immediately noted their changed demeanor. What did father have to say? She asked Ethan. He shared some insights about the family legacy, Ethan replied diplomatically, and some memories of grandmother I'd never heard before. Something flashed in Evelyn's eyes, surprise followed by calculation. I see. She turned to Sophie with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Well, Miss Miller, this has been illuminating. I hope we'll see you again. The words were perfect, but the tone made it clear that Evelyn Collins considered the battle delayed, not lost. As they departed, William Collins surprised Sophie by clasping her hand warmly. It was a pleasure meeting you properly, Sophie. Perhaps you could join us for the hospital charity gala next month. Ethan always finds these events tedious. Maybe you could make it more bearable for him. I would be honored, Sophie replied, touched by the unexpected olive branch. In the car afterward, Sophie exhaled deeply. Well, that was intense. Welcome to the Collins family, Ethan said ruefully. Your grandfather gave you a ring, Sophie stated, unable to ignore the elephant in the car. He did. We've been dating for less than 2 months. I'm aware of that, Ethan said carefully. And I have no intention of rushing anything. Grandfather operates on his own timeline. Good, Sophie said, though part of her wondered what the ring looked like, because we still have a lot to figure out. Like the fact that your mother clearly thinks I'm a gold-digging distraction from your destiny. My mother will come around, Ethan said with more confidence than Sophie felt was warranted. And if she doesn't, well, grandfather outranks her. Sophie leaned her head against his shoulder. Your family is exhausting. Yes, Ethan agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. But they're part of who I am. I know, Sophie said softly. And despite their intimidating mansion and dinner interrogation, I think I might be falling in love with you anyway. Ethan's breath caught. You think? I'm still gathering data, she teased, but her eyes were serious. It's terrifying, Ethan. Your world is so different from mine. I keep waiting for the moment when you realize I don't belong in it. Maybe I don't fully belong in it either, he admitted. Maybe that's why we found each other. As the car drove through the glittering Manhattan night, Sophie allowed herself to imagine a future where their worlds could merge, where literature and medicine, scholarship and business, Sophie Miller and Ethan Collins could somehow coexist in harmony. But as they approached her modest apartment building, reality intruded once more. The contrast between the Collins mansion and her 5th-floor walk-up was stark. Tomorrow, Ethan would return to his penthouse and board meetings, while she would grade undergraduate papers and work on her thesis. Could two such different paths truly converge? Or were they just postponing the inevitable collision of their incompatible realities? The velvet box in Ethan's pocket seemed to represent both possibility and presumption. Sophie wasn't ready to see what it contained. Not yet. But for the first time, she allowed herself to wonder if someday she might be. 3 months after the infamous Collins family dinner, Sophie stood nervously in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, the very place where she'd first spilled champagne on Dean Winters and met Ethan. Tonight, she wasn't serving drinks, but attending the Collins Hospital annual charity gala as Ethan's official date. "You look incredible," Ethan whispered, his hand warm against the small of her back. The midnight blue gown, a gift from Audrey that Sophie had initially resisted, made her feel both beautiful and conspicuous. "Everyone's staring," Sophie murmured. "Let them," Ethan replied, unconcerned. "They're just jealous I have the most fascinating woman in the room." The past months had brought unexpected changes. Sophie's literacy program had expanded to 30 schools citywide with significant foundation funding. Ethan had surprised everyone by appointing a COO to handle daily operations at Collins Health, while he focused on a new patient-centered care initiative inspired by conversations with Sophie. Evelyn Collins approached, elegant as always. "Sophie, darling, that color is divine on you." The endearment was new, a calculated shift since Evelyn had realized her father-in-law's unwavering support for Sophie. It wasn't genuine warmth, but it was progress. "Thank you for including my father tonight," Sophie said, nodding toward where her dad chatted animatedly with Dr. Harold Collins. The unlikely friendship between the public school teacher and the healthcare magnate had blossomed after Harold arranged specialized cardiac treatment for him. "Family is important," Evelyn replied, with practiced sincerity. "Now, Ethan, the Hayes family is here. We should at least say hello." Ethan's hand tightened on Sophie's waist. "We'll greet everyone together, Mother." As Evelyn glided away, Sophie squeezed Ethan's arm. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Ethan said firmly. "We're a package deal now." The evening progressed with Sophie growing increasingly comfortable navigating the elite crowd. She discussed education initiatives with donors, debated healthcare policy with board members, and even shared a laugh with Alexandra Hayes, who was now engaged to a surgeon from Boston. Later, Ethan led her to a quiet balcony overlooking the twinkling city. "Remember the night we met?" he asked. "How could I forget? I destroyed my career prospects by baptizing the dean in champagne." Ethan laughed. "You changed my life that night. By providing comic relief at a boring function. By being authentically yourself in a world of carefully constructed personas." He turned to face her, suddenly serious. "I've been carrying something for 3 months." Sophie's heart stuttered as Ethan reached into his pocket and withdrew the velvet box his grandfather had given him. "Ethan, I'm not proposing," he clarified quickly. "Not yet. But I want you to see this." Inside was not a traditional diamond engagement ring, but a delicate antique band set with sapphires that matched her eyes. "It was my grandmother's," Ethan explained. "Grandfather said she wore it every day, even though it wasn't her official engagement ring." "It's beautiful," Sophie whispered. "He told me something the night I picked it up," Ethan continued. "He said Elizabeth chose this for herself, refused the family diamond because she wanted something that represented her, not the Collins legacy." Sophie smiled. "I like her more with every story." "The point is," Ethan said, taking her hand, "I'm not asking you to fit into the Collins world. I'm asking you to help me build something new, something that honors both our worlds." "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you, Sophie Miller. I'm saying that someday, when we're ready, I want to ask you a very important question. But tonight, I'm asking something different." "What's that?" "Move in with me," Ethan said simply. "Not to my penthouse, that's never felt like home. But somewhere new, somewhere that could be ours." Tears pricked Sophie's eyes. "That's a big step." "It is," Ethan agreed. "But after these months together, I know one thing for certain. My life makes more sense with you in it." Sophie thought about their journey, from a champagne spill to family dinners, from professional boundaries to intimate connection. They still came from different worlds, still faced Evelyn's subtle disapproval and occasional cultural disconnects. But they'd built something real, something that transcended those differences. "Yes," she said finally, "but I still pay my share." Ethan laughed. "We'll figure it out. We always do." From across the ballroom, Harold Collins watched his grandson embrace the literature scholar, a satisfied smile on his weathered face. Beside him, Sophie's father nodded in understanding. "They make each other better," the older doctor observed. "Isn't that what love is supposed to do?" Mr. Miller replied. 6 months later, Sophie defended her dissertation on social mobility and emotional authenticity in Victorian literature, with Ethan sitting proudly in the audience. That night, in their new Brooklyn brownstone, a compromise between his luxury and her practicality, he finally asked the question the sapphire ring had been waiting for. Sophie said yes, of course. Their story had always been heading toward this chapter, even when both had resisted the plot. Their wedding was neither Collins grand nor Miller modest, but something uniquely their own. Held in the New York Public Library, surrounded by the books that had first connected them. Evelyn Collins sat beside Sophie's father in the front row, their differences temporarily set aside in recognition of the undeniable happiness their children had found together. "Not all diagnoses are medical," Dr. Harold Collins declared in his toast. "Sometimes the heart recognizes what the mind refuses to acknowledge. My grandson required a different kind of specialist to treat his condition, a literature scholar who reminded him that every patient, every person, has a story worth knowing." Sophie looked at Ethan, her brilliant, compassionate husband who had chosen love over expectation, and knew that their story, like the best novels she studied, had overcome the most compelling conflict of all. Finding authenticity in a world that rewards conformity. "To Sophie and Ethan," Harold concluded, raising his glass, "may your lives together be a story worth telling." And it was.